This number, it's estimated 450 million are living with a mental or neurological condition. And 2/3 of these people will not seek professional medical help, largely due to stigma, discrimination, and neglect. Another 69 million individuals are estimated to sustain traumatic brain injuries each year worldwide, while 1 in 160 children are identified as on the autism spectrum. I'm sure we'll hear a little bit about that tonight. These are just some examples of the millions of people currently living with a disability that is not immediately apparent, and a reminder of the importance of removing barriers for all people living with disability, both visible and invisible. During the COVID pandemic, isolation, disconnect, disrupted routines, and diminished services have greatly impacted the lives and mental well-being of people with disabilities right around the world. Spreading awareness of the invisible disabilities, as well as these potentially detrimental and not always immediately apparent impacts to mental health, is crucial as the world continues to fight against the virus. But we're going to be focusing on a particular aspect of disability as it affects children. And today, we have a very special um, guest who is going to speak to us. This gentleman, and I will take some time to introduce him, and you will know why by the time he starts to speak. He started his career in the auto industry at Mercedes-Benz and Namco. He also worked in banking industry at FSB International Bank PLC and the Metropolitan Bank Limited. He has gone on to lecture at University of Gloucester, the London Centre, Trinity St. David University of Wales, London Centre, and Coventry University London campus. He was a professor at Holt International Business School, London, and he holds the fellowship of the following professional bodies: Chartered Management Institute UK, Higher Education Academy UK, the Society for Education and Training UK. Currently, he runs the iRise campaign, focused on the issue of access to mainstream education for children with special needs. He earned his first degree in physics with honors from the University of Ibadan, Nigeria, where he went on to earn a master's degree in industrial and labor relations. He has gone on to earn an MBA in general management. This was followed by an master's in education degree in educational leadership and school improvement from the University of Cambridge. Furthermore, he has earned a PhD in institutional governance. As a trained teacher, he has earned a postgraduate certificate in learning and teacher higher education, a postgraduate advanced certificate in educational studies, which is dialogue teaching from the University of Cambridge, and a PhD in education, culture, communication, and media from the University College London. Ladies and gentlemen, ordinarily, I will be asking for a huge round of applause, but please give a warm welcome to Dr. Jude Dunkwell. I apologize if I didn't pronounce the surname properly. Please forgive that. But you can see that this is a very distinguished gentleman. I am now going to ask him to speak to us about the topic: human prejudices against disabled children and segregation in schools, why integration in the mainstream schools is a solution. After that, there will be an opportunity for people to ask questions. We want this to be as interactive as possible as we proceed tonight. So please, um, if you have your questions in the usual way, if you use the electronic um, symbols to raise your hand, and then we will be able to, my able boss, who is also assisting with technicalities tonight, Mr. Lloyd Warwicker, would assist me with that. But ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, please let us hear from Dr. Jude Donkwa, please. Thank you very much. And if you're not speaking, please mute. It's important. This is a very important lecture, and I want everybody to follow. So, Dr. Donkwa, please, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for having me, giving me the opportunity to make this presentation to you. As you already know, the title of the presentation is Human Prejudices Against Disabled Children and Segregation in Schools. I intend to address this by taking a dual approach, talking about human prejudices, examining the background, delving into some history on one hand, then on the other hand, looking at the issue of segregation of children with special needs in schools and the benefits of their integration. Before I proceed, I want to clarify something. As we all know from the moderator's presentation, I studied in Nigeria up to university level before I came out here in the UK. And so I believe many of us have. So I need to clarify something we normally say in Nigeria based on our background, based on our experience. When we want to talk about our university education, we talk about, oh, the school we went to, university education. However, for clarity, when you talk about school, school refers to primary and secondary education. Anything tertiary by the definition of a school does not come into school. So when we say, when a Nigerian says to somebody in the UK, oh, my school where I went to university, that would be a bit confusing.
This, she shouts. They've stolen our relatives.
So just to clarify that part of the presentation, so that going forward, when we are having a discussion, when we are making comments, we understand that school relates to secondary and primary education. Am I able to control the slide from my side?
You can just say next slide, please.
Next slide, please. Yeah, the next slide is, I want to introduce myself. Already the moderator has done the introduction, and thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, once again. I'm a lecturer by profession. I prefer to call myself a teacher. And of course, if you go to our campaign website, iRise campaign, they've got a lot more information there, both on the campaign and on my person. Now, I founded iRise campaign to promote the issue of access to mainstream education for children with disabilities. And the question that would naturally follow is, what's the motivation? And that brings to the fore something the moderator succinctly brought up, the issue of stigma and what's the relevance. He talked about people with disability being stigmatized and all of that. And by the special grace of God, I being a person of faith, a Christian, the way we call it in Nigeria, I'm blessed with children with disabilities. And I think the greatest disservice I can do to the campaign, to the cause, is to fail in making people aware of this fact. One option is to come here, make the presentation and go away. But I believe that I aid the destigmatization of the children by making everybody aware that I myself have got children with disability. Therefore, if you have them, you don't lock them away somewhere. You don't shut them out somewhere from the system. because it is not in their best interest, it is not in the society's best interest. Reason being that just as the children without disability have their own humanity, these children with disability have their own humanity as well. And part of what we are trying to study in a recent ongoing research is the dissonance between the humanity of these children with disability and those without disability that enables and encourages and sustains segregation. The moderator mentioned earlier that as part of the introduction referred to the issue of children with autism. And many of us who have heard about them, who have read one or two things about them, are aware of the idea that human beings could be differently wired. Therefore, the issue arises, how can children of different orientations, children of different makeup coexist? Can we go to the next slide, please? I want to very quickly explore the issue of human prejudices. Of course, there is this perception of children with disability as monstrous children. Now the society is a lot more advanced, a lot more educated. Therefore, the level and degree of prejudices 10 years back, 20 years back, 50 years back are not exactly the same today. But at the same time, there's a dangerous trend. And the dangerous trend is that these prejudices still exist, but they appear to be now properly dressed up, glossed over. I've made references to the work of Michel de Montaigne in his essay in 15800, where he made references to society's treatment, society's perception, society's stereotyping of children with disabilities. And if you get to that report, there's absolutely nothing favorable in it. And what's the relevance of that to the presentation? Because these are some of the things that informs human prejudices. As far back as the times of Aristotle, children with deformities were killed for mere fact of being deformed. In the not so distant history, we were told about the experiences under the Nazis, where children and adults with disabilities were equally killed, were also killed in their effort to create a perfect breed, to have a society of perfect breed. All of this over time from research adds, fuels the prejudices we all entertain in different ways against children and individuals with disabilities. An interesting part of it was the work of Annan in 2009. As part of the research, Annan went on to search for the words the words monster and disabled children in Google. And one of the interesting things found was a mother describing her child as a violent monster. Okay, the summary of this slide is that our prejudices are historical. They're informed by different experiences which humanity has experienced over time. The next slide, please. Now I want to briefly touch on the relationship between monster and humanity, because all of this equally fuels the prejudices. Most times people talk about monsters, whether you're discussing a movie, a cartoon. Of course, it goes hand in hand with humans. The whole idea of a monster existing will make no meaning without bringing in the existence of human beings. So that evokes the fear, the fascination, the thrill. And that's as far as the excitement goes. But what we want to point out on this occasion is that it also connotes certain things to certain people. In the works of Shildrick, 1996, it connotes people who are out of control, unpredictable. And such references are made to women on some occasions in some literatures, in some literature. The same monster, as we demonstrated in the work of Annan, is equally used on children and people with disability. What this then means is that there is a perception of this category of people with this identity as not being quite human. Therefore, it denies them certain benefits and protection they're entitled to from the society. Next slide, please. Of course, the next slide talks about the human non-person, which is an extension, a continuation of the perception of children with disabilities, individuals with disabilities. Of course, a lot of people with disabilities, a sizable number of them, as the moderator mentioned in the course of the introduction, have some form of cognitive impairment. As a result of this cognitive impairment, what then happens is that they suffer some degree, some forms of exclusion in the societal quest for some form of justice. Of course, when you're viewed as not having appropriate capacity, adequate capacity, you're not functioning properly, then your needs do not appear to be prioritized. And these are some of the things children with disability, individuals with disability suffer. On that basis, I have referenced the work of Bredotti, 2013, who on the basis of such behavior she considered inappropriate, decided to see herself, identify herself as anti-humanist. Next slide, please. Now, as a result of these prejudices, what we then find in schools from parents is the idea that special schools are the appropriate environment for their children with special needs. They tend to believe that the mainstream schools may not be appropriate, suitable for their children to function.
Down my staff, but I have about eight employees, and we have rent. And
What I've put up on the screen is a model of practices in mainstream school as a result of some of the historical issues I've referred to. Of course, these practices were enabled by the changes in the laws. Well, I'm referring to the United Kingdom. So I'm saying this being aware that people have joined this presentation from different parts of the world. Therefore, depending on the part of the world you are joining from, depending on the part of the world you're joining from, you may have different sets, different laws. Now, sorry, my children came in, so they've just gone out. So to continue, the model, the slides I have on the board, on the screen, relates to the practice models existent in the UK and in most parts of the world on the basis of mainstream schools trying to achieve what they consider inclusion in order to be seen to be conforming with the laws. Of course, by UK laws, mainstream schools are under compulsion to admit these children with additional needs, with special needs, except on certain conditions, two of which are inefficient use of resources or inefficient education of the other children. Now, what we have done, well, what studies have identified, I'm referencing Damian Milton, are the forms of practices existent in these schools. You have the exclusion model. Of course, that's on the top right, on the top left, where the green dots represent the children without special needs, children without disabilities. Then you now have the children with disabilities clustered around. And that's not inclusion in a way that will be beneficial to children with special needs, children with disabilities. Now, some local authorities, in order to meet certain conditions, meet certain terms set out in law, adopt the separation model as a way of meeting their legal requirements. So what do they have? They have a school they call a mainstream school, but these schools have different sections for children with disabilities and children without disabilities. Again, that's not inclusion, but by the prescriptions of the law, that tend to meet some of the requirements. Now, on another level, you have some schools with the integration approach. So you've got the children with disability clustered together in the middle and the other children clustered around them, creating the impression that they are included. But what you have is these children with disability existing in isolation on their own, right inside the school. Now, the fourth model, which is the desirable model, is the inclusion model. And that's where you have children with disability coexisting equally with children without disabilities. Now, before I move to the next slide, I want to clarify certain things here, particularly as it relates to iRise campaign. The issue of disability has so many dimensions, so many challenges. iRise campaign is focused on the issue of children with special needs who their parents believe are capable of functioning in mainstream school settings, accessing mainstream schools. Why would iRise campaign pursue these objectives? Next slide, please. As I said at the beginning of the presentation, I've had extensive interaction with both professionals and parents of children with special needs. And the consistent information from many of the parents of children with special needs is that the mainstream schools are not beneficial to their children. I also said during the second slide that I've got children with disabilities. And as a parent of children with disabilities who understand my children best, I'm fully aware of what they're capable of. Therefore, for any parent who has any belief in any way that his or her child is capable of attaining mainstream education, these are the benefits. The first point on the slide, based on a research from the European Agency for Special Needs and Inclusive Education, shows that children with disability who spend more of their education in mainstream school perform better than those in special schools. I have some friends who made the conscious decision of moving their children from mainstream school to special schools. Again, perhaps at that time, some of this information were not available either to myself or to them. But with the knowledge of such findings, it helps parents in such positions to make informed decisions. Another study by ENSCO and CESA found that in schools where the effort at improvement is driven by inclusive practices, that the children's academic performances are better than those who take a different approach. Of course, some of us are business managers, business practitioners, and we know the traditional Republican conservative argument of a rising tide lifting all. So that's the kind of idea here, that where a school focused on improvement takes an inclusive approach, the performance, the academic performance of their children have been found to be better than the others. Again, the OECD, in its research of the global economy, found out that the highest performing educational systems in the world are those that are more inclusive. Next slide, please. Of course, the previous slide focuses on general statistics. The slide that has come on now gets a little more personal and specific to the person, the child with disability. Studies have found that children with special needs who spend a good amount of their time in mainstream education end up having better paid jobs. Other studies have also found that a child with a disability accessing mainstream curricula leads to higher education, provides more opportunities, provides a higher likelihood that such a child will sit for requisite exams that would give him or her access to higher education. Next slide, please. Now, other findings research have equally shown is that children who have the opportunity of, children with disabilities who have the opportunity of mainstream education from early stages of life have higher chances of developing positive relationships which they will benefit from in the long term. This is bearing in mind that loneliness, isolation are key issues which disabled person organizations, DPOs, are complaining about due to their impact on mental health issues relating to children with disabilities. Again, research have found that children who attend mainstream schools, that's children with disabilities who attend mainstream schools, have higher chances of engaging in leisure activities, which lasts them a lifetime. And such children are likely to engage in a whole range of activities that will enable them to be financially independent. Again, I need to reiterate that the benefit of these findings is that without them, we have a very short-circuited idea of the future of the children with special needs, what they can achieve. We believe that with their disability, they go to a mainstream school and they're a liability in their lifetime. But people have bucked the trend and they have been able to support these children to live a meaningful life in the mainstream. And these are what these research findings are providing us, such that if we share them with the larger society, with friends, with relations, parents of children in our schools, it will go a long way in making a difference. Next slide, please. Now, to summarize very quickly, as I began, the issue of human prejudices is a historical thing. And it will not go away just like that without us understanding what brings about these prejudices in ways that will then enable us to tackle them. Of course, as part of the brief presentation I have made, there are different models of inclusion. There are different models of practice. Some of them are not actual inclusion. Those of them that are not actual inclusion are presented by schools as inclusive practices. Therefore, the hope is that we can go away from this presentation and be able to challenge such practices in ways that will enable, that will encourage the schools engage in more inclusive practices. And finally, based on research findings, we are now aware that there are a whole range of benefits for both children with special needs and the larger society by way of having these children with special needs integrated in mainstream schools. Once again, I wish to end by thanking you for giving me the opportunity to make this presentation, and I'm happy to address any questions.
Thank you very much for a very insightful dealing with the topic in the manner which you did. I'm also grateful to you because you're not just academically qualified to deal with the topic in your personal life. You are also qualified to talk to us. And I'm sure there'll be a number of questions which will be coming your way. But could I start off myself just asking you, we know that the theme, as I started for today, is that not all disabilities are visible. So they are visible and invisible. And you've dealt with how it affects children and how they're segregated from schools. But the point I want you to deal with is because you would accept or agree with me that not all disabilities are actually visible. And in some cases, maybe the visible ones is what people will refer to as the monster child, or as you described. But there are also some who are not visible, but also have that disability. For example, I had a friend whose child was excluded from a very top market fee paying school because he had ADHD. And they felt that they couldn't deal with it and that he should go to a special school. And my friend himself was saying how, and was very confused on how to deal with it. And I remember saying to him just off the cuff that, look, in Nigeria, where you would have done your studies, you would have probably suffered from ADHD as well, but probably the cane would have been applied to you in such a manner that nobody would recognize that within that child is that struggle. It could be autism, it could be a spectrum of autism, but it may not be visible. But that's one issue I want you to, if you may, before all the questions start flowing through, deal with the both visible and invisible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, that's a very good question, because I'm going to deal with it from both a personal dimension and I'm not a lawyer by practice, but some of the legal developments that have taken place over time to strengthen the position of these children. Yes, we had that challenge as well. And of course, my children fall into the visible side of it. Okay, therefore, the regular thing is exclusion, isolation, and all sorts. And what you find out is that the head teachers, first of all, are motivated by performance, of which they are paid for. Therefore, having these children out of the system is to their advantage. So they take the minimalist approach, do very little, and seek the option of sending the child out of school. And I'm assuming that in the UK, most of the local authorities share similar practice based on the Department of Education regulations. What you then have is that if a child is excluded from school for a certain number of days, then a permanent exclusion could take place. But the good thing is that there was a law that came on, a common law that came on in August 2019, which makes it illegal, sort of, to exclude children with specifically autism, but it extends to special needs. Now, what this common law sets out or establishes, well, it more or less reinforces what the school managers are expected to do. Bringing in exclusion as a last resort. In other words, where a child has special needs.
Okay, I will get it. Thank you.
The managers are expected to take certain steps in seeking support for both the child and the family over extended period before considering measures such as exclusion. But in practice, of course, they do little and they jump into exclusion. Now, how do you deal with this? Again, when a family has a child with special needs, that's a lot of work on its own. Now, managing the system to encourage them to do the proper thing is another duty on its own. And what I normally encourage parents to do is keep at it by holding the school accountable. Ensure that communication is in writing, because in the event of any dispute, what you said becomes irrelevant. What was said to you becomes irrelevant. You find out that the teachers, the head teachers, they don't want to put anything in writing because they engage in a lot of practices that are not acceptable. You can't compel them when you're having a chat to put anything in writing. But on completion of your chat, you can send an email to summarize your discussion and ask them for clarification if there were any points you've mistaken. Now that's for the children with noticeable disability and challenges. Now, on the other part, children without, perhaps somebody that lacks speech, somebody who is not violent, maybe some milder forms of disability that is not obvious. The schools are under obligation to seek support for these children. The interesting thing is that somebody may listen to this presentation, particularly somebody from the side of the government, and they will find some of my comments strange. But let me tell you my personal experience. My daughter's school had a new head teacher. And I believe that as soon as he came on, they gave him some information, and he was determined to show my daughter the gates out of the school. At the beginning of the new academic year, I sought help through the local authority for my daughter. And the local authority requested the head teacher to put certain things in place. This was September. By November, the first exclusion occurred. I went back to the letter from the local authority. None of the measures that the head teacher was supposed to put in place was in place. And what this resulted in was internal isolation of my daughter. Now, what is the solution, in my opinion? Again, I like to emphasize, in this part of the world, is a society of law and order. Therefore, whatever you're doing, whatever you're pursuing, has to be systematic, and at the same time, consistent with the laws. You have a right to approach the local authority directly, though normally it should be through, normally it works through the schools, but you have a right to approach the local authority directly if you are not satisfied with the services you're receiving from the schools. And let me assure you of one thing. Yes, the schools don't like this, but the good thing is that it makes them aware that they're being monitored. They're not going to tell you your rights. They're not going to tell you, oh, the services they're offering you is not up to prescription. I'm emphasizing this idea of services not being up to prescription because my children just completed 6 years of primary education. And I thought that in the course of these 6 years of primary education, I had mastered the art of EHCP, that's Educational Healthcare Plan Development. I thought their EHCP was a perfect one. And on completion of their primary education, the mainstream secondary schools refused to take them on. So at the moment, we are at the tribunal. The instructive thing here is that when my solicitors looked at the existing EHCP, which I thought was top-notch, my solicitor said this was rubbish. What's the point? What's the message here? I've worked with a school, well, with 2 schools and the local authority for over 6 years to produce EHCP that I thought was good quality, but is actually rubbish.
Yes. Thank you very much. You've gone into some great detail there. I just wanted to, so I'm not the only person asking questions. Is there anyone else? Can you indicate by way of, if you can't use the electronic way of indicating, I'm sure Mr. Worker is on hand to see if anybody's got their hands up. Has anybody got their hands up that we can see? Does anybody have a question or a comment to make in relation to what we've heard today, which is quite insightful? Is anybody there?
No hands up.
No hands yet. Okay.
No.
Can you, whilst we are looking at it, this the iRise campaign. Can you talk to us about that, please? What does that involve?
Okay. Thank you very much for that. I need to go into some specifics because I'm sure you've looked, there's a chance you've looked at the website, and it may not come across as the traditional campaign or pressure group and all of that. And I think I need to begin by explaining why I have taken that approach. I've given you an insight into my experiences interacting with the schools in order to get them to give to the children their entitlement. I want to assure you that in the course of doing this, they're not sitting back and laughing at you and smiling with you. They're definitely going to fight back. And I can equally assure you that it could be nasty. And these are some of the things while parents will simply go away, take the children to a special school, go to another school. But the reality is that the problem in the system continues, persists. And not until you step your foot and say things have to be done properly and lawfully, then there'll be no change. Okay, now, why iRise? Why the structure? What is it into? In setting up iRise, I had an option of setting up a proper NGO, a proper charity. But from the Nigerian experience, we knew how suddenly the Federal Road Safety Funds found its way into Wale Soyinka's account, unsolicited, under IBB's regime. The point I'm trying to make here is that I try to limit my exposure in that if I set up a bureaucracy, then it's not Jude and Jude alone, okay? They were able to create that mess in the Nigerian situation because they could access Wale Soyinka's account and they put money there, which he did not ask them to put, just to tarnish him. And that's the point I was trying to make by saying that when you're engaging in this kind of campaign, it could be nasty. Therefore, I took an approach that would create a flat structure, and I alone will be accountable for what goes on. But at the same time, it's focused on a contemporary issue. Now, iRise campaign is focused, as I said earlier, on the issue of access to mainstream education for children with special needs. We're doing this through training programs, through seminars, making people aware of their rights, making people aware of the benefits of mainstream education for these children, creating incentives so that different ways we try to get across to people who may find this information relevant. Also, we have other disability persons organizations we are in collaboration with. There is an Alliance for Learning Disability Organizations, which we are partners to. So these are the different ways iRise campaign is pursuing its objectives.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I think there's been some hands up. The first one I saw was Murphy, Baba Murphy. Is he still there? And then, oh, the hands is down. Okay, it's gone down.
There's
Okay.
Maurice Rousseau.
Maurice Rousseau, yes, please. Are you there, Maurice? Is Maurice there? Please unmute yourself.
Okay. I am. I was muted.
Yes, thank you
So,
very much.
yeah. Good
Ask
evening,
your
gentlemen.
Evening.
Let me go back to. I'm a parent anyway, so let me go back to the clip before this, which was about the parents getting involved on their children. I think it's very important. One thing I have done very well and I've tried to do better is to get involved in the school, in all my kids, all the activities they have in school. I'm a member of the parent teachers. I'm a member of almost all the organizations. So where they are playing their games before the corona came up anyway, which still doesn't stop me from saying, okay, learn remotely or not learn remotely. But I give out emails. I am very involved in the school system. And I've had 3 kids from one school. And I always tell them and preach one thing, you know what? I don't have money to send you to pay your school fees in university. So you have to have these grades and I have to follow it. I write personal emails to teachers, to their teachers. When they do wrong, I say, call me directly. So I'm trying to contribute about how involved. You don't just wait and then they go to school and you think all is done. I don't care how much you have. But what about those parents who have children here and they are not living in living where you are? Like I live in America. I'm talking from Atlanta. Exactly. I have friends who are paying their children's school fees, and those children don't go to school. Some of them don't go to school, so you don't account for them. You don't sign. There are too many letters. There are too many things I sign. I interact with teachers, and I go back and forth and improve in order to improve their grades. Even sometimes we have to extend where we have to get them into extra learning. And it has worked out successfully. So what I'm advising is that parents should get involved in the school system wherever they belong to. They get involved in their children's activities, read their homework, look through their homeworks. I still have IDs for my 2 kids in college. I go in there and see how we are doing. I'm a Nigerian, and I use the way, in fact, I'm even stronger and harsher than the way my father trained me with my kids here. And they've proven successful. So I would advise that their parents be involved in all the activities. They have their cars in college. They come here, you park. I said, so long as you live here, you go by my rules and law, whatever rules we have here, you follow it. What time do you get home? When did you, and they, at the age of 16, my kids have started working. I just go get them a driver's license, permit, and then the next thing I engage them in a job next door. So they start to account for money, and then I don't have to give them any extra cash. So I say, okay, then you have your scholarship. I say, have you passed very well? You say, yeah, here it is. I follow it, the assignment, I stay with them, I go with them. It's cost me a lot of time though, but it's worth it. So right now, I can proudly say, you know what, I can leave this country and go back to Nigeria and lie down and sleep. My children are taken care of. So parents should learn how to move with their children.
Just sorry to interrupt you, Morris. I think somebody is asking on the chat line, the children that you've referred to, is any of them with special needs? And how have you dealt with that?
Oh, fantastic. That's a good question.
Yes.
No, that's a very good question in the sense that none is, like you said, some are visible and some are invisible. Exactly. As I say it, there is none physically and visibly. But then I feel that every child, in some way, is a special need child. Because sometimes I'll be like, you're still sleeping, you haven't woken up. I mean, it's insane for a child to be sleeping at 11 a.m., 10 a.m., or 9 a.m. when I've already woken up by 4:35 a.m. in the morning. So I can imagine what those are going through, but I have friends close to me that have those exactly. So I know their pain, and it has not been easy. I have a friend, very close friend, who has a 23-year-old daughter. She's been fed through the tube for the past 23 years. I have others. I have a friend who has 3 kids. They're all in special needs. They're all in this category. And that's 10 miles away from me. The effort is too much.
Yes.
It's heartbreaking.
Yes, I can understand that. Thank you very much. Before I ask Dr. Donko to comment, let me take more questions. I think Mr. Wofeso, I think you've got your hand up. Do you have a question? The president.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Judunku, for your wonderful presentation and giving us an insight into how terrible this issue of exclusion is. At the beginning, you did mention that inclusion is the best practice, only except for 2 reasons that they can exclude, and that is ineffective use of resources, and I think you said disruption. How are these 2 factors measured, when they want to come to that conclusion that, okay, for example, you said, you can, you have the right to contact the local authorities, to give to give support for a special needs child. At what point can they come to a conclusion that, oh, this resource we're giving is being used inefficiently, for example? If you can just expatiate on that.
Can I ask one more person to ask their question, and then Dr. Donko, you can then comment on, take them all together. I think Mr. Asapuai.
Yes, thanks a lot. Mr. Donko, fantastic presentation. My former colleague, how you doing, man? Good to see you.
Yeah, I'm doing well, and you too. I muted my speaker earlier.
Fantastic and good job. So I happen to be a key stakeholder in special needs children, like we call them in America. I have a nephew who is special needs, autistic, and I have a niece who's on a very mild spectrum also, okay? So this is something that is close to my heart. And I think you're doing a fantastic job. Well done, well done. And I'm sure your children will be eternally grateful for that. And I have been privileged being a father to 4 children myself, including one in college and others in high school and elementary, to have had encounters with school authorities, with educators and faculty members. And some of the things you said, you were talking, I was smiling, right? Document interactions, right? Play them back, make sure you have, your I's dotted, your T's crossed. Those are great things, and I can relate with those. My question to you will be twofold. The first one is enabling, supporting, and advocating for special needs children is a pretty complicated and heavy lifting endeavor and activity. However, I'm also aware that there are other extraneous factors that contribute to the success or the outcomes of the efforts. My question to you will be, in the United Kingdom, how do you think things like race, class, play into your ability to navigate, that complex puzzle or maze and get the desired outcome? Okay, that's one. Number 2 will be Arise campaign. What kind of opportunities do you think are out there for you to get collaboration across the Atlantic and potentially support? So thanks again, Jude. Good to see you.
Doctor, I'll let you take those questions because there's quite a number of issues there. And then we'll come back to more questions. So let me leave the floor to you to deal with the questions as they've arisen now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and thank you, Ima and Tokwe, for the questions. Let me begin with Tokwe's question. He referred to the issue of inefficient use of resources and inefficient education of the other children. That relates to the issue of admission of the children, not to exclusion.
Okay.
So, like I said, we are at the tribunal right now trying to sort out the children's admission to mainstream secondary school. And they have refused to give them admission, or well, they refused to give them admission earlier. So the grounds, the lawful grounds they could do that are efficient use of resources, 1, or efficient education of other children. Now, the interesting thing from the perspective of the solicitor dealing with the case is that these are very high bars for schools, okay? Because when you talk about efficient education of the other children, we're not talking about a situation where the other children are able to achieve distinctions in their education. The explanation of the solicitor is that we're talking about any education at all. In other words, whether the child could merely coexist while the other children have their education. That's coexist with other children. So it's a very high bar for a school to be able to demonstrate that the child will not be able to exist and the other children have their own education. Now, on the efficient use of resources, well, that's one part of the same law. But again, the barristers are, well, the solicitors have explained that if the school is able to defend that on the basis of their POS, that the tribunal could affirm the child's right on the grounds that the local authority has an absolute duty by law to make every school conducive for every child. So these are the two sides of it. And the good thing is that is that it fits into one of the questions asked by Ima. Ima talked about the issue of race, class, and how it plays into my expected outcomes. And the thing there is, that when I'm dealing with the people I'm dealing with, some of the reactions I get, switch on the light. Some of the reactions I get, I understand very clearly is because of my race. And I'm talking to people and they're looking past me and they're saying things. They're looking past me and they're saying things that they know, well, that I know do not make sense. And it's all about, that's not the way we do things around here. But in completely literal sense, you know that what they are doing is not consistent with the law. Okay, so what's the link there? If the local authority has an absolute responsibility to make every school conducive for every child, then why the dispute in the first instance? Why would my children be denied admission on the basis that the school haven't got sufficient resources, or the resources they will require will not be efficient? Then the second question Ima asked about collaboration. As I said earlier, we are part of the Alfie Alliance, an alliance of disabled people's organization. We work together, like Ima mentioned. Of course, there are different dimensions, different angles of this matter. It's quite historical. Therefore, I'm just a new entrant into the struggle. So we are collaborating with Alfie. We have applied for partnership with UNICEF, and we hope to hear from them down the line. And I'm happy I'm hooking up with Ima, who I saw in the last about 15 years or 16 years ago. And a few people I'm talking to here who I do not know may be in a position to support in so many different ways. And I'll appeal to members, to attendees, to please visit the website. My contact details is there, and anything that could be done at all, because this is not just a service to my child or to your cousin or to your niece. This is a service to humanity. A service to humanity that has come a long way. We are talking about situations where in the past, these children were simply killed. Now we're in a situation where they are being tolerated. We want to move it to a situation where they are fully integrated and they are part of the society. But what is happening is that those who have the responsibility to do the needful are window dressing what is going on. And part of the objective of the campaign is to continue to point the torchlight wherever we need to. Again, back to Ima's first question, the issue of race, prejudices. We going for meetings. I feel very happy to be underestimated because it gives me some advantage. I interact with people that are barely educated, people who barely understand the issues they are dealing with, and they believe they can pull one fast one over you, largely because you're of a different skin color. And when the push comes to shove, it turns out a different ball game. So just to wrap this up again, I'll appeal to members, to the attendees, people listening to the presentation, that this is a lifetime endeavor. This is a service to humanity. Any support in any way, except financial, support in any way in terms of contact, in terms of publicity, networking, access to information will be highly appreciated.
Thank you. Before I come back to the issue that Morris raised earlier, I think he was raising the issue of parents being actively involved in their children's lives, be they special needs or not. Let me just, I'm going to come back to that topic, but I want to take a question from Victor Bajumo. Is it Victor?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much for having me. Mr. Jude, very big thanks to your talk for today. And I also want to thank Zero Meridian Deck for organizing this seminar. My question is this: I really don't have huge knowledge about, not knowledge, but I'm not into this too much. I just have a little knowledge about it. So let me ask a layman's question, if I may use those terms. For a school to categorize a child as having disability, especially with the ones you've mentioned that are invincible, is there a measuring tool used by the school or the society, the government or the authorities to tag or term these kids as being disabled? Is there a measuring tool that is used? If yes, then what level is it, if I may ask? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vic. Sorry, go on, Mr. Moderator, sorry.
No, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you very much, Victor. There is no tool out there where schools apply to determine whether a child is disabled or not. What happens in most cases is when they believe a child is underperforming in any aspect, then they make further inquiries. Now, for the child in the UK context, for the child to be formally recognized as being disabled, then they have to follow medical procedures. Of course, the person has to be disabled in a certain context. Is it lack of sight, hearing, mobility? Disabled in what sense? So all of these are an outcome of a medical report. And by UK laws, once this is identified, there's a provision for the school to put in place an education and healthcare plan for the child, which is a comprehensive approach. So it's not just about the child's educational needs. They also care for the child's healthcare needs, as well as the child's social needs. Now, what then happens in some cases is that the schools would not do the needful by seeking an education and healthcare plan for the child. Now, from my personal experience, I'm giving a personal opinion here. I appear to understand why, because at the time my children obtained their first, at that time it was called a statement. By the time my children obtained their first statement, the head teacher at that time was leaving the school. The head teacher was a very accommodating head teacher, and she said to us that before she wanted to ensure that the children had their EHCP before she left the school. She did this and left soon after. After she left, based on the experiences we went through, then it dawned on me why she did that and the benefits of the EHCP. Now, what's the issue here? Without the EHCP, the school would have been able to exclude my children permanently. With the EHCP, because the EHCP, Education and Healthcare Plan, a section of the EHCP on the basis of the child's needs and recommended solutions outlines the school of placement. Therefore, for an EHCP or a child with an EHCP to be excluded would require the local authorities' input. And where the parents resists, then it has to end up in the tribunal. Therefore, for a head teacher to attempt to kick out a child with EHCP, indirectly the head teacher is invited a court case. So in a nutshell, back to the question that was asked, are there standards for tools or standards to determine a child with disability? No, it's not. There's none that is there. That a child comes in and based on the child's attributes, they are able to figure out whether this person fits into that definition or not. I believe it's something that manifests over time. It's either the parents are aware and they tell the school upfront, or the school begins to notice certain things and ask certain questions. And down the line, certain things will be identified. Thank you.
Mr. Akinkunle, please, your question. Is Mr. Akinkunle there?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Last week, I think it was last week or recently. First, I'd like to thank the group that is working towards this segregation in school and why integration in mainstream school is a solution. Recently, I was on one of your forum, and if you remember vividly, I talked about Senko in schools. But what I think it's not happening, it's what we need to look at first as African parents. It's what is called understanding that our kids have special needs. Because I'm sorry if this has been discussed, but I think a lot of African parents don't really understand what special needs are and how it is actually picked up in the kids and how to manage it. And most times we always think the school should manage this for us. And my observation, because I am also a father, I've got a stepdaughter who has special needs, which we've been managing effectively without any issues. But the problem is, I think a lot of people don't really understand what they need, how to manage it, and still live in denial. And we tend to leave everything to the school. So my question is, what is your organization doing in educating people about knowing how to manage this disability and how the school as well can ensure, because sometimes even when you tell the school that your daughter or your son or your kids have special needs, they want to tell you to manage it yourself. And rather than educating you, pointing you in the right direction. They leave everything for you to manage. And it's becoming an issue these days that most parents don't even know what to do, where to get help, and how to manage the situation. So are any plans in place for people to be educated and to know how they can manage this effectively? Thank you.
Dr. Duncan, can you just note that question whilst I call on, is it Akua Kanata? Is it Akua? Have I pronounced it correctly?
Yes, you have.
I have.
Yeah, you have pronounced it correctly, yes.
Thank you very much, sir. Please, can you ask your question or make your observation, please?
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And thanks for putting this together and for bringing such a very insightful and knowledgeable speakers, on this very important topic. This topic really cuts close to me. I'm a school administrator myself. I'm a vice principal here in Canada. So the topic of, providing, meeting the needs of children with special needs, it's integral, to the success of any society. So thank you for bringing this very important topic, to bear. My question is very similar to the last question as well. From my experience, speaking from the cultural perspectives, of African parents, specifically Nigerian parents, it's, there's the feeling, like everything is perfect with us, all right? Everything is perfect with our country, even if it's burning down. Everything is perfect. Like we cannot, own up to, needs that are real, all right? And our kids pass through education system, they have real special needs that should be, going through and being advocated for through special education provisions. And, we allow them to struggle through the system, all right? One of first, like we want them to do exactly what we did, like we used to say, cramming, those big textbooks, about you and all those things, all right? But the problem that we have seen, all right, is that we grew up in a system that's totally different from where our children are growing up, So I would like to know what are, the I Rise campaign, all right, it's doing to educate, all right, parents that are like us, like, we represent, those parents that, are raising our kids through an education system that we did not participate in, all right? At least most of us, probably 90% or more of the people attending this program. So it becomes really very, very relevant, for this kind of information to be passed through them. What are the ways, what are the strategies that parents, that we can use in ensuring that parents like us become more knowledgeable in helping our kids, accept or understand how we can support them and ensure that early enough, those special needs are identified, and the needed support is provided for them so that they do not, go through school disadvantaged.
Thank you. Just one more person. So Dr. Donku, if you can note that as well. The theme seems to be parents at the moment. So let me see, Gomez, there's somebody there, Gomez iPhone. I'm sure iPhone is not their name.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
Gomez?
Gomez
iPhone.
Yeah, Gomez is the name.
All right, okay. Please, take it very briefly, please. Your question or observation for our guest speaker. Thank you.
the doc, Dr. Jude, man, really inspiring and touching presentation. I really applaud everything you've said so far. Sure didn't know that we had all this kind of things going on, but he's well. And you said something about financially, not financially, when you were answering a question. I wanted to know why not financially. That's one. You said there's no way of we like doing any contribution financially to what you're doing. Is that what you mean by saying not financially, or something else?
Okay, Doctor, please take those questions. I think there's Maurice who wants to come back, but please hold on. So, Doctor, can you take those three questions as they are? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the first two questions are quite similar, and they're very interesting questions, and I think they apply to most migrant parents. I'm no exception. When this whole thing started, of course, we started with our second children, twins, a set of twins. It was unexpected, and you know, the traditional Nigerian way, we're all Christians. We want to rely on our faith. It's not our portion. That's the popular refrain. In fact, the nursery school the children were at that time, they were trying to seek help, support, and we thought they were just trying to capitalize on our children and get additional funding for their school based on our children. And there was a dispute, and we had to withdraw the children. So the point I'm driving at is the extent we went on denial that our children had needs. And that's exactly what the first question and the second question is focused on. Over time, we then realized, yes, this is real. And we also realized the importance of the help available out there. And the help available out there extends to protection for the children. Because when a child has a statement of special needs, as it was known then, or an education and healthcare plan, as it's presently known, then the child is protected. It gives the child a protected identity. Now, the good thing here is that it's not only the attendees that are going away with something. I'm also going away with something myself from the second questions, because previously, before iRise was formally incorporated this year, but the last 2 years I've been involved. Well, before then I was involved in informal activities. The last 2 years I was involved in some kind of informal seminars, trainings, before I eventually incorporated it formally this year. Now, the point is this. From the questions now, I believe I have to go away and begin to make provision for migrant parents so that we will have professionals coming to talk to them on the kind of questions that's been raised, on the kind of issues that's been raised, on the need for us to be able to identify these needs as quickly as possible, because the earlier they're identified, the better the help the child receives. Okay, so my response to that, to the issue of what we are doing in order to enlighten the parents, partly what I have just done, partly what we did on the 16th of November when we did the formal inauguration. We speak to parents.
Please, can we mute ourselves, please? If you're not speaking, please mute.
Yeah.
Please mute. Thank you.
Yeah. We speak to parents, we advise them, give them information, signpost to them where they can also get help, citizens advice, or the specific professionals that have the competence to deal with their needs. But now the takeaways that I'll go away and in the space of 1 year, I believe there's need to have at least 1 or 2 activities focused on migrant parents with foreign culture to be able to see these things for what exactly they are. Now, on the second question from Gomez on the issue of financial, yes, at the moment, we are not into anything financial. It's largely intellectual and vocational. I'm not sure what the future has down the line. We may become a full charity down the line, then we'll be talking about financials. But at the moment, there's no provision for financials. And the reason, as I explained earlier, is just to moderate my exposure. Thank you very much.
Now, can we mute, please? If you're not talking, please mute your system. Thank you very much, Dr. Dunku, for your answers. I was going to come back to, I know Maurice started this conversation about input of parents, and he was quite passionate about that. Maurice, what else did you want to add? I can see you've put your hand up again. I was going to put that question back to the doctor, but what else did you want to add?
Thank you. I want my wife to also give her opinion, if you don't mind, on this. She's by my side.
Okay, we don't object to that. You are one.
Yes, because there's an experience we went through. We would like to share this with Dr. Duncan about what experience we went through, so
Please.
others will learn.
All right.
Hello, good afternoon.
Well, good afternoon, good evening in London.
Exactly.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you guys doing this, the Arise campaign. The last time my husband told me about the violence against women, and I listened, and it was really encouraging. I was like, oh my God, this is a very good thing. You guys should do this more often. I deal with a lot of parents because I have like customers, clients, and with our own community, the race and the ethnicity really plays a major role in the way they treat our kids in school. Because even my daughter had an experience where they referred her as a terrorist in school because she was bullied so much. We didn't even know what she was going through. She was so quiet. We kept asking her, are you okay? Is everything okay? Even with all the things we were doing in school and engaging with the teachers, she refused to say anything. So I was telling my husband, I said, this girl is not acting right, until she retaliated by sending a text to another student. And they took it so seriously that we had to go to tribunal. It was serious. We didn't know where to go to. We even had to go to a lawyer, put money down, but we finally did it ourselves. Because I asked my husband, I said, how are we going to deal with this? So I'm really, really grateful this is going on. So that way we can have information on how to deal with this. And I've had parents come to me, Nigerian parents, say, what is going on here? And I see the other group, the other ethnic group, Americans, and they will tell me, the children bring guns to school, and it's even less stress than the children, our children go through. So I'm really, really impressed with your movement. And I hope this will really help us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tonight's event is actually organized by the National Association of Seadogs, Zero Meridian chapter, under the leadership of Mr. Wofeso. But we've had a very, very interesting conversation this evening. We're about to round up. But before we round up, Dr. Donko, what I want us to do, because we've had quite a lot of attention to you, there's been a lot of attendance. What I want us to do is to see what is it that we take away from here. I understand that money is not the issue at the moment. Sometimes in future it might be, But it sounds to me that you're talking about collaboration intellectually and human resources to engage. And we've gathered from what people have said in the conversation tonight that parents have to be involved fully in their children's development, whether they have visible or invisible disabilities. So what I want us to do in the last 7 minutes that we've got before we round up is for us to focus, and certainly coming from you, because you're the guest speaker tonight, what do we take away from here? What are the bullet points in terms of what we need to be doing as we leave tonight so that we can have follow-ups and we don't just have a chat, talk, and then we don't follow up and don't do anything positive going forward. So I want to leave that to you to tell us what is it that you need to do, and what do we take away from this. I'm also looking at the chat. Maybe going forward, there needs to be cooperation or with other organizations, maybe including the National Association of Seadogs, Zero Meridian chapter. But please tell us, what is it that we should take away from here so that we can not just walk away from this and not have an agenda going forward. So over to you, Dr. Donkwa.
Thank you very much, the moderator. The key message of Arise campaign is that any parent who believes the child with disability is capable of functioning in a mainstream school must not be railroaded to a special school. Okay, the trend appears to be that once a child is diagnosed or once a child is believed to have special needs, that the special schools are there, well structured, funded, resourced for them. And I can assure you from a personal experience, I don't want it to seem as if I'm running down any side of things, of the system. I'm speaking purely from personal experience because I had twin children, and when it became difficult, we sent one to the special school and we left one in the mainstream school. When we went on the visit, before he went to the special school, they promised heaven and earth. They took us around the school, which is normal for every school. But they said the taste of the pudding is in the eating. And when he arrived there, throughout the time he was in the special school, he did not, even on one occasion, receive a specialist speech therapist visit. This was the school that promised us heaven and earth, while the sister we left in the mainstream school continued to have visits at interval. And due to that deficiency, we had to engage private speech therapists. So in summary, for this particular point, if you know anybody whose child has disability, but is capable of functioning in a mainstream school, the person is in the UK. I need to be specific because the work we are doing at the moment is restricted within this region. The person should remain in a mainstream school. Now, the second point, if your child have needs, please ensure you go for an EHCP. That's what is known as now, Education and Healthcare Plan. Because that's the contract between the child and family, between the child and the government, or between the family and the government and the state, or the local authority. As I mentioned during my presentation, of course, the EHCPs we prepared over 6 years. At the end of primary school, the solicitor told us it was a piece of nonsense. But the fact is, if you have it in place, And if it is properly done, then the child is protected. Perhaps there will be a presentation on EHCP, what amounts to a good EHCP for a child down the line. So these are the two key things I want to focus on for this particular event. The importance of mainstream schooling for children with disabilities who are capable of functioning in the mainstream, and the need to obtain an education and healthcare plan to protect these children. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation today. This has been a very deep and insightful experience for me, and I'm sure for everyone who has been who has attended tonight. It seems to me that the main issue, as you've rightly said, is taking away from here. There has to be collaborations. We all have to work together going forward. This is an area which quite a lot of people haven't had to deal with, or maybe dealing with in isolation. I think we all need to be dealing with these things together. So I think that part we take away from here. We also take away the fact that we should fight going forward to make sure children with special needs or disability, either visible or invisible, should not be excluded and be put in special schools. Because from what you have said to us, that is not the way forward. So thank you very much. In the absence of, does anyone else who hasn't spoken before have anything to say before I finally thank Dr. Donkwo for a very special, Mr. Gomez iPhone, you put your hands up again, or was that the hand that was up before?
No, I put my hands up again to
Please,
one moderator. His name is Dunku, Jude Dunku, not Donku. Please don't be Donku. His name is Dunku, his name is Jude Dunku.
Doctor,
Dr. Jude Dunku.
Yes,
and I want to appreciate him too. Please, yes. I want to appreciate him once again, and then because it's way back in the days, and appreciate the Zero Meridian, the leadership and everything. It's was really awesome experience. And Jude, keep it up. But any way we can support, as I told you, please let us know, because we come way back. Please, we really appreciate everything you've done today. Thank you once again.
Yes, thank you very much for that, for the pronunciation. I apologize, and I did apologize in the beginning if I didn't pronounce it. Dunku.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm an Italian.
You're Italian. Sorry. I mean, I've been receiving private messages, people saying, "Look, we need to work in connections or with your organization. I think we have to make sure that we work with you." I just noted that Mr. Owuaje, the national president of National Association of Seadogs International, has joined us. Mr. Owuaje, is there anything you want to say before we round up? Can you hear me? Sorry to put you on the spot, but I just noticed that you came on board. So I thought that as the international and national president of NAS, that if you've got anything, please.
Right. Well, first and foremost, just like you right, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. I just thought I should at least call in, no matter what the case may be, because I'm actually just about to board a flight. I just thought I will check on to see how the webinar is going, and at least try and listen and learn about a few of the discussions that is going on. Unfortunately, I think I must have missed a lot of what's being discussed. So I can't really talk to what the previous discussion was. But at the same time, I would like to thank everyone for putting up this webinar. And I'm sure you will all have done good justice to the topic itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We wish you a safe flight wherever you're heading. It has been a very insightful, fantastic conversation tonight. I think everybody who's on board now will agree that this has been a very, very useful conversation and discussion. And there's been very wonderful contributions as we've gone along. So I thank everybody. I thank Dr. Donkwu for his contribution tonight. And we've decided that we're going to be keeping close contact with you going forward, and to make sure that we're working together and we're making sure that our children are not put into special schools prematurely, or if we can avoid it, they must remain in the mainstream schools, because that's where they do better. So thank you very much, everybody. I'll give you the final word, Dr. Donkwu, please, if you've got anything to say before we round up.
Yeah, thank you very much, the moderator. I want to end by thanking everybody for making out time to listen to the presentation. I've listened to your comments, your questions, and from them, a few things have come up. I have my own takeaway from that, and I'm quite optimistic that I'll gain some support from you by way of spreading the message. And also, if you've got ideas that will support the campaign, that would be most appreciated. Once again, thank you very much for having me.
So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, our special guest. This is it. It's been a wonderful experience for all of us. And thank you once again, and good night. See you soon. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. The Mr. Warwick, are you still there? Okay. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.